The T.Rex is probably the most feared carnivore of the late Cretaceous period. Or is it? While it has impressive size and powerful jaws, it lacks one thing in particular: speed. And for this reason, many of its prey was likely able to simply run away. And that was a problem that many large theropods had. In fact, large theropod dinosaurs like the T.Rex are estimated to have reached top speeds of only 12 to 16 kilometers per hour, which is actually kinda slow. But there was one theropod dinosaur in particular that did not have this problem at all. In fact, with a maximum speed of almost 60 kilometers per hour, it was a true speed demon. We are talking about the Carnotaurus, a predator with a bull-like head, tiny arms that make T.Rex look well-equipped, and legs built for sprinting across ancient Patagonia. The story of Carnotaurus begins in the arid badlands of Chubut province in Argentina. The year was 1984, and renowned paleontologist José Bonaparte was leading an expedition into the La Colonia Formation, a geological layer rich with late Cretaceous fossils. What Bonaparte and his team uncovered was unprecedented: an almost complete skeleton of a previously unknown theropod dinosaur. But this wasn't just any theropod. The skull bore two distinct horn-like structures above the eyes, prompting Bonaparte to name it Carnotaurus sastri, combining the Latin carno, flesh, and taurus, bull, literally creating the meat-eating bull. The specimen was dated to approximately 70 million years ago, placing it in the late Cretaceous period, just before the mass extinction that would wipe out the non-avian dinosaurs. The skin impressions revealed something unexpected. Carnotaurus didn't have scales like many other dinosaurs. Instead, its skin featured rows of large, non-overlapping conical studs, interspersed with smaller tubercles. These weren't feathers or proto-feathers, but a unique type of scaly covering that may have served as lightweight body armor. This single specimen remains the only complete Carnotaurus ever found, making it one of the most precious fossils in Argentine paleontological history. Today, it's housed at the Argentine Museum of Natural Sciences in Buenos Aires, where it continues to draw visitors and researchers from around the world. To understand what made Carnotaurus such a unique predator, we need to examine its bizarre anatomy from head to tail. Standing about 2.5 meters tall at the hip and measuring roughly 7.5 to 9 meters in length, Carnotaurus wasn't the largest theropod, but it was certainly one of the most distinctive. Let's start with its most obvious feature, that skull. The name Carnotaurus wasn't chosen randomly. This dinosaur had two prominent horn-like structures above its eyes, giving it a bull-like appearance. These weren't true horns like those of modern cattle, but rather extensions of the frontal bones of the skull. The purpose of these horns has been debated for decades. Were they used for combat between rival males? Were they display structures to attract mates? Or did they serve some other function entirely? The consensus among paleontologists is that they were likely used in head-pushing contests between males competing for territory or mates, similar to how some modern animals use their horns. But the horns weren't the only unusual feature of the Carnotaurus skull. It was also remarkably short and deep compared to other theropods. Its jaws were lined with blade-like teeth designed for slicing rather than crushing, evidence of a specialized hunting strategy we'll explore later. Moving behind the skull, we find perhaps the most ridiculed feature of Carnotaurus: its absurdly small arms. If you thought T.Rex had small forearms, Carnotaurus takes this trend to the extreme. Its arms were so reduced that they couldn't have reached the dinosaur's mouth and had only 4 fingers, with the 4th finger being just a small remnant. These vestigial limbs were essentially useless for hunting, leading paleontologists to conclude that Carnotaurus relied entirely on its massive head and jaws for capturing and killing prey. The extreme reduction of the arms may have been an evolutionary trade-off, allowing resources to be redirected to other, more essential adaptations. And speaking of adaptations, Carnotaurus's legs tell a fascinating story. Unlike the thick, powerful legs of T.Rex, Carnotaurus had proportionally longer, slender limbs built for speed. Its lower legs were particularly elongated, and its feet were arranged in a compact, efficient structure, ideal for rapid locomotion. Complementing these running adaptations was a remarkably stiff, reinforced tail. The vertebrae in the tail had specialized features that reduced flexibility but increased its function as a counterbalance and stabilizer during high-speed pursuits. This tailored anatomy points to a dinosaur that was built for chasing down prey rather than ambushing it. But just how fast was Carnotaurus? This question has fascinated paleontologists since its discovery, and recent studies have begun to provide some answers. Carnotaurus may have been capable of reaching speeds of up to 48 to 56 kilometers per hour. This doesn't make it the fastest dinosaur, but for an animal of its size, Carnotaurus was remarkably swift. For comparison, the average human sprinter tops out at about 23 kilometers per hour, while Usain Bolt reached just under 45 kilometers per hour at his peak. But what made Carnotaurus such an efficient runner? Several anatomical features contributed to its speed. First, its leg proportions featured longer lower limbs relative to upper limbs. This creates a longer stride length and more efficient locomotion. Second, its foot bones were arranged in a compact, high-arched structure that would have acted like a spring during running, storing and releasing energy with each stride. And third, unlike many other large theropods, Carnotaurus had a relatively narrow body, reducing drag and allowing for more efficient movement. You can say that Carnotaurus was the cheetah of the dinosaur world, adapted for running down prey across the open plains of late Cretaceous Patagonia. But how did it actually kill? With such tiny arms, Carnotaurus couldn't grapple with its prey like some predators. Instead, it relied entirely on its massive head and powerful jaws. But even here, Carnotaurus was unusual. Its teeth weren't as large or robust as those of T.Rex or Giganotosaurus. They were blade-like, better suited for slicing than crushing. This has led paleontologists to propose a rather brutal hunting technique. Carnotaurus likely employed what's been called a slash and bleed strategy, running alongside prey animals and turning its head to inflict deep, slicing wounds with its teeth. It would then follow the wounded animal until blood loss caused it to collapse from exhaustion. This strategy is supported by several anatomical features. The Carnotaurus skull had reinforced nasal bones and unusually strong neck muscles, which would have allowed it to absorb the impact of striking prey while running at high speeds. Its narrow skull would have also reduced air resistance during these attacks. Some researchers have even suggested that the horns might have played a role in hunting, possibly being used to injure prey during high-speed collisions. However, most paleontologists believe the horns were primarily for display or competition between males rather than for hunting. But what dinosaurs did Carnotaurus hunt? The late Cretaceous ecosystems of Patagonia featured a variety of potential prey animals, which include smaller ornithopods and other herbivorous dinosaurs, possibly juvenile sauropods or other vulnerable dinosaurs, though adult sauropods would likely have been too large for even a full-grown Carnotaurus. It wasn't the apex predator of its ecosystem in terms of size, but it had carved out its own specialized role in the predatory landscape of ancient Patagonia. Nearly 4 decades after its discovery, Carnotaurus continues to fascinate paleontologists and dinosaur enthusiasts alike. Perhaps most importantly, Carnotaurus reminds us that dinosaurs weren't generic monsters, but highly specialized animals adapted to specific environments and ecological roles. Though it wasn't the largest or most powerful predator of its time, it is a striking example of nature's endless capacity for creative adaptation. It shows us that evolution doesn't always favor the biggest teeth or the strongest bite. but sometimes rewards unusual specializations that open up new ways of hunting and surviving.